The training deck of the Valorous Dawn hummed with the controlled chaos of the morning drill. Arwen moved through the obstacle course with practiced efficiency, her boots finding purchase on the magnetic plating as she vaulted over barriers designed for species twice her size. Around her, cadets from a dozen worlds struggled through the same exercises. Feathered Krill, who complained about the gravity, Crystalline Vosh, who moved in geometric precision, and the Cathari. They were the newest addition to the Galactic Defense Initiative, a species of feline-like beings whose fur ranged from midnight black to burnished copper. What made them unique wasn't just their appearance, it was their young. Cathari cubs, barely knee-high to Arwen, accompanied their parents everywhere during the first 5 cycles of life, learning through observation what would later be encoded into training. Instructor Velmoth, a towering krill with violet plumage, barked orders across the deck. Again, the Devourers don't wait for you to catch your breath. Arwen planted her hands on the climber wall, hauling herself upward. The synthetic material bit into her palms and she welcomed the familiar burn. She'd been training harder than usual this week, not to prove anything but because she'd heard whispers in the mess hall. Whispers that humans were too fragile, too weak-boned for real combat. She'd show them fragile. Her fingers found the top ridge. She pulled herself up with a grunt, swinging her leg over. Reep! The sound cut through the ambient noise like a blade. Arwen froze, feeling the cool recycled air against her lower back and thigh where her uniform had torn from hip to knee. The fabric, designed for durability across multiple species, had finally given way under the strain of human flexibility, combined with human determination. The training deck didn't stop. Exercises continued around her, but Arwen felt the weight of dozens of eyes turning her way. Her face burned hotter than any exertion had made it. Cadet Arwen, Velmoth's voice carried across the deck. Why have you stopped? She couldn't answer. Her throat had closed up. Through the gap in her uniform, pale skin showed, so much more vulnerable looking than the fur, scales, or chitin of her fellow cadets. She felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with modesty and everything to do with being human among aliens who already questioned her kind's place here. A small sound drew her attention downward. Nakar sat at the base of the climber wall, his copper and cream fur fluffed in what Arwen had learned was Cathari concern. The cub couldn't have been more than 3 cycles old, barely old enough to speak galactic standard, his wide golden eyes fixed on her torn uniform, then on her face. Hurting? He asked in his kit-like voice. No, buddy, Arwen managed, climbing down with as much dignity as she could muster. Just embarrassed. Nakar tilted his head, processing this. Then, without warning, he turned and scampered away on all 4s, disappearing into the observation area where off-duty personnel and non-participating cubs watched the training. Arwen stood awkwardly beside the wall, trying to hold the torn fabric together with one hand. She could request permission to return to quarters and change, but that meant walking the length of the training deck, past everyone, with the tier visible. She could try to continue training, but the tier would only worsen. Instructor Velmoth approached, his massive form casting a shadow over her. Cadet, do you require... Nakar brings help. The cub's voice piped up before Velmoth could finish. The small Cathari bounded back across the deck and Arwen's breath caught. In his small paws he carried a strip of dark cloth. It looked like it had been torn from someone's off-duty shirt. Behind him, 3 more cubs followed, each carrying similar strips in various colors. They assembled around Arwen like a tiny honor guard. We hide the hole, Nakar announced with absolute seriousness. So you're not embarrassed. So you keep training. Arwen knelt down, bringing herself to eye level with the cubs. Her throat tightened for an entirely different reason now. You did this for me? A black-furred cub named Vishka nodded solemnly. Mama says humans are fragile but strong. You train hard, we help. With surprising gentleness, the cubs began tucking and tying the cloth strips around her waist and thigh, covering the tear. Their small paws worked with the same precision their parents used in combat drills. Other cubs noticed and approached, some bringing more cloth, others simply sitting nearby in support. The training deck had gone quiet. Cadets from every species watched the scene unfold. Instructor Velmoth cleared his throat, a sound like rocks tumbling. Cadets, while we wait for this, wardrobe adjustment. 50 gravity squats begin. Groans echoed across the deck, but they were good-natured. The pressure of attention lifted from Arwen as everyone returned to their own suffering. Nakar tied off the final strip with a proud flourish. "There, now you look like warrior with battle marks." Arwen smiled, running her hand over the patchwork of cloth. The cubs had essentially created an improvised armor layer over her uniform. It was crude, colorful, and completely against regulation. It was perfect. "Thank you," she whispered. "All of you." The cubs chirruped and chittered in response before scampering back to their observation area. But Nakar paused, looking back at her with those two wise eyes. "You not fragile, human Arwen. You bend, not break. That's what Mama says makes humans scary." Then he was gone, leaving Arwen kneeling on the training deck with tears she refused to let fall. She stood, testing her range of motion. The cloth strips held firm. Around her she caught expressions from her fellow cadets. The krill female who'd mocked human weakness yesterday now looked thoughtful. The Vosh who'd questioned human inclusion in the GDI nodded with what might have been respect. "Cadet Arwen," Velmoth called. "Are you combat ready?" She snapped to attention. "Yes, instructor." "Then complete the course. Double time." Arwen ran. She ran like humans had always run. Not the fastest, not the strongest, but with the endurance that had chased prey across ancient savannas until stronger creatures collapsed. She ran with strips of cloth tied around her by children of another species. Children who'd learned that humans might tear but would keep going anyway. She ran, and behind her, she heard it, soft at first, then growing. The sound of small paws pattering against deck plating. The cubs had left their observation area and lined the course, chirping encouragement in their kit voices. By the time Arwen crossed the finish line, every cub on the training deck had joined them, creating a corridor of sound and small, waving paws. Instructor Velmoth approached her as she caught her breath. "Unauthorized assistance," he rumbled. Then quieter. "But perhaps the most important lesson of the day, humanity breaks, but it seems you teach others how to carry the pieces until you're whole again." Arwen looked at the cloth strips, now sweat-stained and dirt-smudged. Battle marks, Nakar had called them. Maybe he was right.